Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
Good morning. My name is Tylena Goyo, and this is Rise and Thrive on USALA Media. And I'm so happy to be back after a bit of a hiatus. I hope that you've been enjoying the shows with Zachariah Julian and Josephine Tarrant. Today, I am so excited to be here with longtime friend and incredible, successful Native entrepreneur, LOUIE Gong. LOUIE Gong is a Nooksack visual artist and designer who got his start decorating band sneakers. Today, as the founder and CEO of Eighth Generation, he is one of the most successful Native entrepreneurs in the country, and I would say globally. Hi, LOUIE. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Thailand. Thank you for having me. So excited to talk to you.
Yeah, and you are in Seattle today, is that right?
Yep, I'm in Seattle, in the shadow of CenturyLink Stadium, in what is essentially my original art studio. So as Eighth Generation has grown, there's no room for the CEO there, and so I have my own space offsite, and my old studio happened to be available, so I grabbed it. I know that a lot of good, positive work can get done here, so I'm happy to be in this space again.
So you're doing some transitioning, and so you say that Eighth Generation has grown. I'd love to step back to the beginning and talk about how Eighth Generation was founded. And I know that you had a very successful career prior to working in art professionally. So if you could take us through a little bit of background of that, that would be awesome.
Sure, it's most people don't know that before I ever picked up a pencil to draw, I had done a lot of work around race and identity, and work in education as well. So my educational background's in school counseling, and after 1 year of that, I decided that I did not want to work in the public schools, and so I transitioned into higher education. Um, Higher education eventually brought me to Muckleshoot Tribal College. This is in about 2006, where I was an administrator, and it was during that time working on the Muckleshoot Reservation in Auburn, which is about 45 minutes south of Seattle, that all this work that I had done on myself, and to prepare myself for a future career started coming together with the cultural experiences that I had as a kid and what was being presented to me, um, by the broader Native community. And I started putting ideas together really quickly. The initial ideas were not about art, or they definitely were not about business. They were about identity. And sort of simultaneously, as I was working on my higher ed career, I was getting involved in what we were calling at the time the modern multiracial movement. And I became a volunteer with a national organization, well, which isn't active anymore, but at that time they were prominent due to a magazine, and the organization was called Maven. So I went from volunteer, and over the course of a couple of years, eventually a board member, and then vice president, and then right at the time that Barack Obama was running for the Democratic nomination for the president of the United States, I became president of this national organization that was leading the discussion around what it meant to be someone of mixed race. And because Barack Obama was of mixed race and so high profile, people were asking, who is this guy and what does it mean? Is he black? Is he Kenyan? What is he? And what we found out at that time is that the whole country was totally ill equipped to talk about race and identity. And because I was in that role with Maven, I was asked to sort of help frame this discussion around identity for a national audience. And it was through that experience, having opportunities to speak like on NBC Nightly News and MSNBC, New York Times, back in 2007-ish, that I realized that the experiences I had growing up with my Chinese grandpa and my native grandma in my tribal community were not just relevant to people outside of my community, they were absolutely needed. And so I became really confident that the boundaries for what I could possibly do or influence in my life extended way beyond the boundaries of my community. And that foundation really set the tone, or that made eighth generation possible. Um, because I knew that what I had was valuable, and that my grandma and grandpa had left me with everything that I need in order to be successful and navigate my contemporary life. Um, um, yeah, and it also, through the process of learning about identity, done a lot of just maintenance for here and here. And as part of that, I recognized how other people's expectations were limiting my sense of what is possible for my future. And
Mm.
all of that uh, was powerful information for when I picked up my very first pair of shoes and drew on them with a Sharpie. If people don't know, my first art adventures were around custom shoe design, and it was never intended to be a business idea. I never thought I was going to be an artist. I just doodled on a pair of shoes. And then when I wore them to the tribal college where I was working at that time, this is about 2008, my coworkers were like, "Man, those are sick.
Yeah,
Where'd you get those?
yeah.
How can I get a pair?" And that's what started eighth generation.
So I think I heard in an interview you saying that you just didn't see yourself. You were shopping for shoes and you didn't see yourself, or you didn't, nothing moved you. And you thought, well, I can just make something that speaks to me, make something that comes from who I am. And that's how you created your first pair of shoes, which I think you posted recently a photo of your first pair, which is so, they're like, you know, uh, so symbolic of eighth generation. Um,
Mhm.
and it's interesting to look back at that because so much has happened over, what has it been now, 15, has it been 15, 20 years,
Yeah,
right? So things
roughly.
have changed so much, but at that time it was really pretty revolutionary what you were doing, and not just the painting on shoes, but bringing art into community, and incorporating all those things that you're talking about with identity and relationships and family, and how we see ourselves. And I remember you had talked to me about you doing traveling and working with puzzle pieces, that this kind of exercise that you were doing with communities. Um, I think the incorporating all those things into your artwork and then bringing it into a company was something was so radically different than anything that was happening at the time. I mean, you were really at the forefront, and you really paved the way for so much of what's happening right now.
Yeah, thank you. For perspective, I'm standing here, a successful native entrepreneur, and lies at a very stark contrast with how I was raised. I've spent the first 11 years of my life in a house with no running water. Raised by grandma and grandpa, and then when we moved to the Nooksack tribal community when I was 11, it was like moving to a mansion. And so I started on my journey with nothing, and it was a huge success that I graduated from high school. It was a huge success when I graduated from community college and then college. And um, so, I've it's been the icing on the cake for me for like the last 20 years. So I feel very, very fortunate. Um, but what that means is that when I first started getting traction with my art, doing shoes, um, and I thought that, oh, maybe I can make something of this. Well, I didn't have any resources whatsoever to apply to fuel this journey. And one of the things that I started getting requests for right away when people saw that my shoes were getting popular was to do workshops. And because I had a school counseling background and an education background, it was a real natural fit. I not only put together workshops, but unlike a lot of folks that were doing workshops at the time, I had the training that helped me understand how I could make those workshops practical for people working within education systems. So I aligned them with national standards, created curriculums, agendas, Along the way, I've helped, dozens, of other people doing workshops get organized in that way. So I'm very proud of that work. And people really never talk about that either. But I've always sort of had this educational component that has followed me in my journey and remains a big part of what Eighth Generation does today. But so the workshops I did around shoe customization, I called Design Yourself, and they sort of used custom shoes as a platform for exploring identity. And the shoes just immediately engage youth, and then hitting them with some really accessible talking points that they could take away to help them navigate their own experience. And in tribal communities, a very high percentage of people identify with more than one race, and almost no education was being done about it at that time. So I feel like the 150 or so workshops that I did must have made an impact along the way. But in my business journey, that those 150 workshops, along with the uh, keynotes that I was doing at the time, provided the seed money for me to start to launch into products. And I think one of the most revolutionary things that Eighth Generation has done is focus on developing our own business capacity rather than waiting for a non-native business, usually a white-owned business, to decide that they want to help us. And I think by focusing on the former, we have developed, we're like Eighth Generation is like a Swiss Army knife. Like, we can do anything now. So any direction that we decide to go into, we will be successful because we're confident that we will be successful because we have the tools already, but also because our 20 plus staff people are predominantly native. All that information that we're acquiring in our journey and investing in ourselves is going to get sent back into their families and communities. So once we got it, no one could ever take it away. And I think that basic approach to how we make a living from art is what has really changed the game for Native people, who are now getting a larger piece of the pie, not a big piece of the pie, not even a fair piece of the pie yet, but a larger piece of the pie around products featuring Native art than we have ever got in the past.
Right. Very smart. Really smart. And part of all of that, and you've said so much, but part of that is your generosity in this process. So I I remember hearing you say something about, we can talk about cultural appropriation all the time and what the outside world is doing, but until we can create other options ourselves, then we're not moving forward. And I think that it seems like you've taken that with you every step of the way. And like you said, the Swiss Army knife, or the branches, right? That you're growing, and you're um, offering knowledge and skills, which actually leads us to the inspired natives, and your vision with that, which I would love to talk about. But we have to take a quick break. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to talk about LOUIE's Inspired Natives program. And we'll be back. This is Tylena Goyo on USALA Media.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
I'm here with LOUIE Gong, who is the founder and CEO of Eighth Generation, which is eighthgeneration.com is the website, right, LOUIE?
That's right, eighthgeneration.com, spelled all the way out.
Spelled all the way out. Check it out. And it's at Eighth Generation on Instagram as well.
Yep, _generation on Instagram.
Perfect. So check it out. When we left for break, we were getting ready to talk about this program that you created to work with Indigenous artists to help, I guess it's an entrepreneurship program, right? And so we had Sarah Agaton House on our show, and it was such a great conversation. And um, my biggest takeaway was she said that you have this mindset of when we do better, when we all do better, we all do better. And I'd love for you to talk more about that because as I know you as a very generous and thoughtful and very smart person, and you're what you've created in the world is phenomenal. So how does that all work for you?
Yeah. So, I wanted to create something sustainable. And when I was building eighth generation, it was not because I wanted to build a business empire, nothing like that. What the entrepreneurial journey represented to me was bringing together my value of education, this sort of activist nature that I have, and my love of art, and then this sort of penchant for solving problems. And when I was designing shoes, by the way, I have a pair right here. I just thought I would do a show and tell. This is a
Yes,
relatively new pair.
beautiful.
Um, Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, my shoes are super popular. Like I had a Facebook following of 50,000 or more people in the first year back in 2008 or 9 or something like that. So if it was hard for me to make a living because the journey to making a sustainable living for Native artists was laden with middlemen, whether it was galleries or non-Native companies occupying space on the shelf, or just people not looking at us as actual entrepreneurs. They want us to be artisans and craftspeople.
Right.
Anyway, there were tons of barriers, and so the business developed as my way to solve those barriers for myself. As soon as I started having some success making products and then reaching consumers directly, I started helping other artists do the same thing. And in the beginning, that was not very organized. It was just, wow, I really love your work. Have you thought about this? And then the conversations would grow. And I found out that I could really be of support to other artists. Eventually, that help became more and more structured, and I started to call it the Inspired Natives Project.
Okay.
If people have not followed eighth generation, the Inspired Natives Project is connected to our mantra at eighth generation, which is inspired natives. That's us, not native inspired. Native inspired is the term that non-native businesses use to describe their fake native art. We'll talk more about that later. But through the Inspired Natives Project, we help build the business capacity of the artists we work with. So at eighth generation, we don't just license the art, get it in perpetuity like most companies do, and then we're off to the races selling the product. We try to bring the artists with us in the journey. They participate as much as they want in the product development process. For some artists, they want to be involved at every step and learn as much as they can. Others, that's not their focus. So, they leave it up to us to make suggestions, and they give thumbs up or thumbs down. It's different for every artist. But if the artists need it, I'll help them with their logo, their e-commerce. Other members of our team can help them with, tax reporting, troubleshooting, all the different things that come up as you're trying to develop a business. And we do that intensively for the people that, like Sarah Agaton House, who are involved in our Inspired Natives project. But I also do that informally for all the other artists that we work with if they need it, and a ton of artists that aren't even involved with us and just reach out to me, with a question. I really do want just as many economic opportunities for Native artists as possible. Um, and at eighth generation now, we specialize in blankets. And before eighth generation came along, it was very rare to collaborate on a blanket. If you did, it was with Pendleton, and they have you get like $1,500 and 6 blankets. And which now, as an insider to this business, I realize how offensive that is. Um, at any rate, we've designed over 70 unique blankets in the last 5 or 6 years. 100% of them designed by Native artists who are paid for their work. And some of our artists, like Sarah Agaton House, are making enough money to build a facility in their community, to hire community members, and basically start saving for kids' college, like really working towards building wealth through the work that they're doing with eighth generation.
So let's back up a minute and talk about the blankets. For those who don't know, can you explain the significance of woolen blankets in Native communities and why there was such a need for a Native company to step forward, to create these blankets?
Yeah, wool blankets are a very esteemed gift in tribal communities. So when someone does something great, like graduate from school or retire from 30 years of service to their community, they're often gifted with a wool blanket. Wool blankets are, gifted for a huge number of reasons, and for that reason, they're huge business in Indian country. In 2000 and that's why they're the perfect platform for me sort of exercising that middle space in the Venn diagram around art, activism, education, and business. So it wasn't by accident that I chose blankets, put it that way. But the initial idea to pursue blankets as a business endeavor came in 2009 when I was asked to keynote the National Indian Education Association convention. This didn't have anything to do with my art. This was about my work around race and identities. So when I finished that talk, I was wrapped for the very first time in a wool blanket. It happened to be a wool blanket by Pendleton. They make beautiful wool blankets, but almost all the ones with native art on them are fake native art, and that's a problem.
So they're
But
not designed by Native artists at all.
yeah, so in 2015, before eighth generation launched, we did an audit of Pendleton's website. We looked at all the blankets that were tagged Native American inspired, and we found that about 95% of them were not connected to a native artist at all. Hmm. So that's out of over 250 products that were tagged Native American inspired at that time. So that gives you a sense of the way that company aligns with Native communities, and you times that snapshot in time over the number of years that they've been in business, and you could see the extent of the exploitation that a company like Pendleton has been responsible for. It is a big problem in Indian country because every dollar spent with Pendleton is a dollar that could be going to Native communities, and some of our communities are among the poorest in the entire country. You could walk through the mall and see that almost every single store in the mall has a native print in there. Almost none of them are aligned with a native artist. And I think that through eighth generation success over the last 10 years, along with the success of other businesses as well, that is changing. And consumer awareness has grown to the extent that people are asking, who is the artist when there's a native print on something? And that's good for our entire community. But yeah, so when I was gifted that blanket, it was a couple months later, I was sitting on the couch and I looked at the label. I was so proud of that blanket. And it said number 11 out of 450 or something like that. And I started to do the math and I was like, oh my God, that is so much money going straight from our, important organization to a non-native company. We need a native-owned source for wool blankets. And if we had that, it could be done right. And what an economic driver it could be. And so at that time, I started my very long journey to launching wool blankets with eighth generation. Eighth generation has never had a business loan. There's no business experience in my family. I've really had to rely on my most cherished mentors in my business journey, and that is Google and YouTube. So very, very much self-taught. Anyway, so after about a 5-year process, I've for just designing for a wool blanket, which is a whole thing in and of itself. And in 2015, eighth generation became the first native-owned company to ever offer wool blankets.
What an incredible journey. And I love that story that about you being wrapped in the blanket and then, you just felt so good about it. And then you're sitting on your couch saying, wait a minute, we got to do something about this. And it's incredible what you have done and how many, remind me again, how many blanket designs that you have.
We're launching new blankets almost on a weekly basis, but I think right now we're at about 70 unique blankets that we have designed in collaboration with Native artists. Each one of them paid for their work. So if you think about the landscape of opportunity to do these kind of things before eighth generation, it was very rare, even non-existent. But now, because of eighth generation success and the blankets we're creating, plus the pressure that we're putting on other businesses through our success to do business in a way that represents fair trade, as defined by eighth generation. So we're definitely the gold standard for how to align with Native communities. And I'm super proud of that, but it also comes with a lot of pressures. So right now, the spirit of the times is that we see a lot of established companies that have been selling fake native art for a long time, shifting gears and changing their talking points and taglines to look more like what we're doing. We also see a lot of hipster brands who are driven by, or maybe well-intentioned, but driven by guilt, changing their business models to closer match what we're doing. And this is a effort not to express values, in my opinion, because we have decades, for most companies, we have decades of information to see what their values are. For some countries, or for some businesses, we have centuries of information to judge their values. Mm-hmm. The changes that we're seeing in 2020, 2021 are the result of eighth generation's success. Mm-hmm. And their efforts are either to suppress our growth or to recapture a portion of this migrating consumer base that's becoming more aware of how they're spending their money and looking for businesses like eighth generation. Or they're looking to pat themselves on the back because natives and working with BIPOC people is cool right now.
I pat themselves on the back for marketing reasons, not necessarily for any kind of personal social justice, moving social justice forward reasons.
That's so true. And, it's happening so often now that eighth generation is having to send cease and desist because the talking points are so close to what we've created organically through over a decade of activism on the issue. And in some cases, they've even copied our tagline, and rather than saying inspired natives, not native inspired, these huge companies with marketing teams and, an established effort to pose as having these values are saying stuff like inspired indigenous, not indigenous inspired. So they're riding on the backs of this kid who grew up in a house with no running water, and the Snoqualmie tribe, who, by the way, have purchased eighth generation and have owned it since the end of 2019. But because we're now owned by the tribe, we have a lot of muscle behind the hustle. Mm-hmm. And so unlike generations of native artists, generations of native people who had that spark of creativity or entrepreneurship and have just got swallowed up by capitalism and this process that's playing out right now, which is other businesses seeing our momentum and trying to sort of close off that opportunity before we can get to it, we can hold space and prevent that from happening. And I'm super proud of, the strategic ways that the eighth generation team and the tribe are working together to really jam open the doors to economic opportunities for not just ourselves, but for future generations. This is really important work. It's happening right now. And if you're in the market to buy something around native art, please take more than the typical 5 seconds to decide whether or not the company you're buying from is a good one. Look at the roots of that company. And are those roots, really reaching indigenous people beyond, business relationships?
Right. And a good place to start would be going to the eighth generation site. You have a lot of information on there, and you have links that lead to the artists that you've worked with, which then lead to other indigenous artists. And it's, I'm happy to hear you talk about the challenges you're facing and how you're working against them. And it feels good that you have the muscle behind the hustle, right? So when you said muscle behind the hustle,
Hmm.
that you do have the strength to be able to fight against what historically Native artists have not had been able to go up against. And it's so, but listening to you, it's so frustrating. And I'm wondering how do you're a creator, but you're also a business person. But how do you balance this, you have to deal with legal stuff, and you have to deal with strategy, and then trying to be a maker and trying to support other makers? How do you balance that on a day-to-day basis without being totally enraged too, by the way?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you know, we're actually Native people running this business. And
Mhm.
so when we see our content appropriate, it's very personal.
Right.
When we see a problem in Indian country, it's very personal. These other carpetbagging companies are not attached to our communities in the same kind of personal way. They're dipping their toes in the water for other kinds of reasons. Um, and so for us in our journey, we have to carry, for lack of a better term, the baggage of being connected to communities. We have obligations to communities that we carry with us in our journey that these other businesses don't. It is hard and frustrating to develop a business and also be a creative. One of the things that I have said from the beginning is, because I was very resistant to being called an artist in the beginning because it happened so fast. Like I went from never having done art to, oh, Louis is a good artist in like months. And I wasn't a good artist. I was just doing something that was relatively new at the time. But I still have not had a lot of time to focus on my developing the craft of my art because the business has been so consuming. However, there's such a strong thread of art in putting ideas together for business purposes. We have a coyote on the box, on the blanket boxes at eighth generation, because it symbolizes how we've been pushed out of our of space that we have sort of a natural right to be in. But through our cunning and resilience, we're finding our way. That's what the coyote's about. Okay, there's a creative element to this cunning, applying our resilience in a cunning way to actually not just survive, but have success. And so I think I'm an artist in the way that I've been able to put one and one together to make three,
Right.
right? It's just like taking water, flour, and salt and making fry bread.
Mm-hmm.
That's magic. That's art. Um, and I think that we're doing the same thing. So my creative juices have been being fed this entire time.
Okay.
Um, uh, but I have not been able to make art a lot in the last like 4 or 5 years because the emotional labor associated with scaling up a business like eighth generation has been just too consuming. In the beginning, I could do both.
Yeah.
I could work all day and then go home and draw on a pair of shoes. Lately, I have not been able to. So that's just that's the choice that I've made. I feel like right now, when I'm relatively young, doing this very difficult work of fighting these battles is what I should be doing. And in the near future, I'll be creating space so I could do more art. Maybe not shoes, but do more art.
Those are beautiful.
Thank
um,
you.
you are where you need to be, right? So that makes so much sense, and I love your analogy of the creativity. It does enhance. I mean, all of it works together to make you an eighth generation a success. We're going to take another break, and then when we come back, hold that thought. When we come back, we'll talk to Louie about that thought, and we'll talk about the third wool blanket design contest. This is Tylena Goyo on USALA Radio. We'll be back.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
And we're back. I'm Tylena Goyo. We're on USALA Media Radio. And I'm here with Louie Gong, who is joining us from Seattle today, way early in the morning. Thank you, Louie, for being here. Louie is the founder and CEO of Eighth Generation. And if you're not familiar with Eighth Generation, you have to get familiar with it and get on their website like now, eighthgenerationallspelledout.com. Louie, when we left, you were about to say something. I know it's going to be just super profound.
Well, imagine this, like, so our business is like grassroots we've risen up from within the native community to prominence, and we're actually starting to be able to compete with much larger businesses. And because of that, I'm sort of recapping right now. They've made adjustments to, create business models or initiative that look like what we're doing. That is incredibly frustrating for us because Eighth Generation, in order to scale, has to save money, find a bigger place, hire each individual staff people to do the work for the additional scale. We have to work, develop new products. We have to improve our inventory management systems. We have to improve our finance systems. Each one of these things is required for us to scale up. Other businesses, if they see what we're doing is having success and they're already of scale, all they have to do is find a native artist to validate their work. And so we're at an extreme disadvantage at this stage of our business because we're on the radar of much larger businesses, but we don't have the same capacity as them. The very powerful tool for leveling the playing field is consumer awareness. And so that's why I really appreciate being able to come on this show and talk about these issues and just reinforce to consumers the importance of making sure that you're voting with your money. Do you want to see more businesses like Eighth Generation or more established businesses co-opting organic energy from native communities and then blocking the organic energy coming from our communities?
They're ultimately doing harm, and they're erasing all the good work that so many indigenous artists and business people have created, or they're trying to. But they will never have the spirit of what you have at Eighth Generation, and and their focus is obviously primarily the dollars, and that just doesn't work for this world anymore. And I think we're all learning that it's not about the money, and these companies keep making these same mistakes over and over again. So I know that your vision and the people that you have behind you, you'll just keep moving forward, and they'll get theirs. It may take time, but they'll get theirs.
Yeah.
They'll learn their lessons, because they can't just come in and co-opt everything. It's constant. It's been like that for hundreds and hundreds of years. Like enough is enough of it.
Eighth Generation, because of our visibility and the fact that we're in this high-profile arena around cultural appropriation, specifically blankets, we're like the camera focused on the crime happening. And there has not been that before. And to the extent that we can report out what's happening behind the scenes at this high level of business, we're going to do it. I think that a lot of these other businesses are hoping that they can align with us in some way so that they don't get called out. But we have made decisions in accordance with our values almost 100% of the time in our journey, and we'll continue to do so. And yesterday in a meeting, someone on our team said, the solution to almost every problem is just to keep doing what we're doing. And that was sure refreshing to hear, because I believe that it's true.
Yes.
But it sort of cuts off that cycle of feeling stress and, oh my God, what we're going to do, this is a big problem. We already know what to do. you know.
Yes, I love that. Actually, that's something that I've been telling myself because I encountered some challenges recently, and uh, that revelation came to me. Just keep doing what I'm
Mhm.
doing, and
Yeah.
because it's working, and you stay true to yourself, and you know what your vision is, right? And so you can't let the outside forces, as much as they try, take you
Yes.
down. But before we move into the blanket contest, which I do want to talk about, I do want to say that I think it's interesting that you've collected all this data, like you talked about with Pendleton, and you're doing this kind of this research and this work where there are hard numbers that can really explain what is going on in terms of appropriation or not, or taking dollars away from Native artists and Native communities. And I just want to applaud that, because I think data really speaks for itself, and that work is important. So thank you for doing that. But let's move into this because this is beautiful. We'd like you have been reaching out to Indigenous artists to submit their work for blanket design contest, and this is the third iteration of that. And you have three categories: the warrior blanket, the elder blanket, and people's choice blanket. Would you talk about them some more?
Yeah. So the third ever International Wool Blanket Design Contest by Eighth Generation is so cool. I mean, the video. Have you seen the? You've seen the video, right?
Yes.
I'm so proud of the video. You guys, if you're listening, you got to go check it out. It's only a minute long, but it has some TikTok vibes. We brought in our
Beautiful.
favorite elders and our
Yes.
favorite veterans to be featured in it. Anyway, I'm so proud of it. But the wool blanket contest is symbolic of Eighth Generation doing what it's always done. You know, we have been doing this since 2017, and it's a really important tool for highlighting the way that we do business. But simultaneously, we're focused on creating opportunities for artists who aren't already connected to Eighth Generation. Um, Imagine the focus on us from Native artists because we represent opportunity. As the CEO, I'm the focal point of people's like desires and dreams sometimes around their art careers. That's a lot of pressure. And I get Facebook messages constantly from artists who want to connect with us. Our team gets a lot of emails. And so we knew that we could only create opportunities for so many artists. And the blanket contest is a way for us to sort of cast a wide net, so that we can become aware of all the talent in Indian country. I mean, we just know that there's so many. We're not going to just organically become aware of them. So the contest is our way of giving them an opportunity to get on our radar. And typically, we've tried to just choose one artist. And the first year we did that, we chose one artist, and the blanket was really successful. The second year, we chose two artists because we couldn't choose from just one. And so this year we're like, let's not mess around. Let's just pick three. And we know we really want to have a veterans focused blanket. So that's one of the categories that we're searching for an artist in. You don't have to be a veteran, but we like veterans telling veteran stories, right? So opportunity there. We also wanted to do an elders blanket to honor the people that have established the foundation that we're all standing on. And it would be great if we could find an elder to do that blanket. And then we have an open category blanket for just like our favorite piece of art, that we think will translate well to a blanket. And we're asking for community input on making that decision. So we really want to engage with the people that are following us, engage with artists. We really want to reinforce the fact that we're a community-based brand. And while we can't create opportunities for every single artist, we really want to uh, make sure there's a possibility of every artist working with us, and that's what the contest is all about.
Right. I think the structure of it is uh, very much more equitable, right? Like you're being very inclusive. Like anybody, you said all over the world, any Indigenous artist can submit for the contest. So how do people do it?
So go to the website, and you'll see a page devoted to the 2021 wool blanket contest. All the information that you need is there. All you have to do is submit a couple pieces of your existing work. The last thing this artist founded company wants you to do is to do work that you're not paid for. So many contests ask you to do work that you're not
Unpaid
paid
labor,
for.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
If I'm going to build a house,
Brilliant.
I don't ask a contractor to build 3 houses or and then go pick one.
Right.
It's not fair, right? So we don't ask that from artists either. If we select you, we will pay you to develop a blanket. And it could be from your existing work and it could be something new. That's something that we can work on together after you're hired.
That's
So
wonderful.
So you're really looking at just a couple minutes to apply. We get hundreds of submissions, and obviously only 3 people can win. But we want to use the 8th Generation platform to highlight as many of these artists as possible. So through our blogs, through our social media, we'll be shining the light on a much broader range of submissions than those that win. So there's a payoff even if you don't win for submitting. Basically, we're creating this beautiful like art, like a huge archive of amazing indigenous art, and it would be such a shame if we weren't sharing that with the world. So if you submit, we'll likely share there's a good chance that we'll share your art along with a link back to your website or social media page if you submit.
I love that. And the applications are open through July.
Yes, I believe so.
And what is the process after the applications close?
After the applications close, 8th Generation will be working with 2 advisory committees. We'll have a Veterans Advisory Committee that will inform us on the Veterans Blanket. So we want to have a nuanced understanding of the symbolism, the colors. We want the artist to be thoroughly vetted by the veteran community. When we choose an elders blanket, we will also have an elders committee that will go through the same process with the artists that we choose for the elders blanket. The People's Choice blanket will be chosen by the 8th Gen team with feedback from the broader community. So we're not making these decisions on our own. We're definitely looking for feedback from other groups so that we can make the best possible decision. Look at this as a values-based process. All we're asking sometimes from these larger companies or institutions is consultation, to make proper decisions, and it's really hard to even get that. I'm talking about broader indigenous issues, and I think through a process like this, we're modeling how to make good business decisions. At 8th Generation, we're not owned by just one person anymore. We're owned by a tribe, which means hundreds of local indigenous people are collectively making decisions about the direction of our business. I think that's awesome. And in our decision making, we always talk about pursuing more than one currency. So we're not just trying to make money. We really want to make headway reclaiming the narrative around Native art. Most of the time when people receive stories about Native people, it's on product descriptions. It's not from a storyteller. It's not from a cultural leader. It's on product descriptions. And all these companies that are mostly selling fake Native art, well, guess what? Each piece of fake Native art has a fake story about Native people to go with it. It's a big problem. We want to solve that. And we also want to create economic opportunity for cultural artists. So we're pursuing all those currencies in our business decisions. And we try to establish groups to help us make those decisions.
Everything that you're doing is just so fantastic and so thoughtful. And you're just amazing, Louie Gong. We have a couple of minutes left, so I want to make sure that our audience knows it's 8thgeneration.com, and tell me again the Instagram.
You find our website. It's just 8thgeneration.com, spelled all the way out. Don't forget that second H. On Instagram, we're at 8th_generation. And on Facebook, we're 8th Generation by Louie Gong. You save yourself some time and just Google 8th Generation and it will all come up. I promise. We're not hard to find. But if you spend a couple minutes on our website learning about our business, I guarantee that if you care about where your money goes, you'll see us as a business that you'd like to support. And the way that we're structured, you can guarantee that no matter how much success the business has, we're going to be making values-based decisions and showing these other companies that you can make values-based decisions and work in a way that represents fair trade for Native artists and still make money.
Right, right. And
I was,
if you, oh, go ahead.
well, I just always say that, everybody, in the world that we live in, everybody needs to make money,
Yes.
but not one person needs to
Right.
make all the money.
Exactly. Exactly. And we have to work with integrity, and we have to honor the people who are around us and our communities and do what's best for everybody moving forward. Um, I do want to mention, because we've been talking a lot about the business side before we head out, that the work on 8th Generation is beautiful. There's earrings and cell phone cases and blankets and pillows and all kinds of home accessories, and it's just gorgeous. And speaking of the Instagram, I follow it and I love it because you always have just beautiful imagery and videos, and you tell us your story in such a unique way, and it just feels good. So I definitely recommend everybody go over to the Instagram page and follow it, because it's just a nice thing to have in your day. Beautiful images, beautiful work, good knowledge.
Thank you. Major shout out to our social media and marketing team. That would include Serene, she's Ojibwe and Hopi, our
Nice.
chief operations officer, who started off in the store. Audrey, who is a project manager. Jade, who's our social media person.
Great.
Hope I didn't forget anybody.
Everybody on the team, you're doing incredible work. But real quick, the
Yes.
store. I wanted to talk about the store. So where's the store? And when people get out to Seattle, what can they find there?
In addition to finding us online, you can visit our store at Pike Place Market. Right now, we're open Saturday and Sunday, reduced hours, obviously due to the pandemic. But if you come there, you'll see almost everything that's on our website, plus special stuff that we make in-house that, we're mixing and matching materials and that kind of stuff. So you'll find stuff in the store that's not available online. You will also get to access some of our awesome staff and talk with them about the business, about Native issues in general, or whatever you want. It's a very friendly place. It's a safe place. It's one of the only Native controlled spaces in the entire city of Seattle, and we're very proud of the Pike Place Market store. It has become a small part of our larger business activities, but it's probably the most symbolic of 8th Generation's energy and community focus. So if you can come visit the store, I think you'll feel that when you walk in the door.
I definitely look forward to getting there one day. LOUIE Gong, thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to have you and to see you and to chat. So thank you so much. And hopefully we will cross paths one day soon.
Great seeing you, Thailand, and thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today on USALA Radio. Please join us next week when your host will be Josephine Tarrant, and she will be interviewing musician Jennifer Kreisberg. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me.